I think that's an interesting statistic because from what I've heard, the legalization of recreational marijuana is supposed to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think they're anticipating at least $1 billion in tax revenue a year.
Okay, that's a good thing.
From this, which is
a good thing.
That's one of the good things.
Maybe they can somehow diminish the effects of the fact that none of us can deduct our state taxes anymore. In California, we're all getting screwed that way. Be that as it may. So $1 billion tax, but as I understand it, only a couple $1 billion increase in the actual market for pot, right? Because the medical marijuana thing is already pretty saturated.
Right. So medical marijuana, very different than recreational marijuana. And this is probably, Dr. Drew, one of the most talked about and misunderstood laws that people are talking about. So yes, I can tell you that recreational marijuana is legal in California as of today, 2018. But that does not mean that you can light up a joint and you can walk around the streets of California or Los Angeles getting high.
Can I do it here?
You can't do it here either.
I can't?
You can't do it in public. Well,
what if I take an edible? What if I take a
not in public? Bear? You can't take the edible and drive. It's still going to be very highly regulated. But the main issue that I think is causing a lot of people confusion that you touched upon is that marijuana is still illegal under federal law.
Yeah.
And we know that federal law trumps state law. So how can it be that a state like California can legalize recreational marijuana? And the reality is that the federal government can absolutely go ahead and enforce their laws in every state in the union. They have a right to do that.
The federal government
The federal government can enforce federal law in every state because that's the law of the land. Or not. And we saw with the Obama administration, they took a very hands-off approach, right? They did not go after marijuana dispensaries because they said we have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
We're going to allow the states to do what they want to do. We won't go and enforce.
It seems like they would come in and raid places periodically, didn't it?
There were a few issues that we saw in California, but for the most part, they weren't going after small dispensaries and they weren't going after small, the medicinal dispensaries particularly. But things are very, very different with the new administration because the Department of Justice has indicated that they do not believe recreational marijuana should be legalized, that they intend on enforcing federal law and that they will crack down on dispensaries in states that have legalized recreational marijuana. So I think it'll be very interesting to see if they stand by that.
What would that look like? Go in and close them down?
Yeah, they're going to do raids. They're going to go in, crack down, close them down, fine them, penalize them.
Would this be federal, agents or DEA,
yes.
Or how would they do it?
So this will involve the federal authorities enforcing federal law.
But what's the enforcement arm? Who is going to go do that?
The Department of Justice.
So, what is the what kind of person shows up at your door? A DEA agent?
They have DEA agents. They have FBI raids. We haven't really seen it happen yet, but they are going to use their resources. I'd be surprised if they spent
their time doing that.
Well, and that was the thing.
And by the way, Massachusetts is coming on board shortly, Colorado, Washington, Washington and Oregon, right? So that's a lot of land.
It's a lot of resources. A lot of people would argue that perhaps our resources should be spent in better ways. But the Trump administration is sticking with the position that they equate marijuana to heroin.
What?
They're not in the drug, in the crime. It is in the same category.
Oh my God.
And so, Jeff, we've just heard various comments. They've put out feelers out there, indicating that they do not intend on taking a hands-off approach like the Obama administration did.
Now that sounds like it's coming directly from the AG, from Jeff Sessions, right?
Yes.
That sort of seems like his kind of
And you are
thing.
so on. I didn't want to mention that, but yes, he specifically made that comment.
How independent is he of the White House? In other words, can Mr. Trump come in and go, Jeff, I don't want to spend money that way. Why don't we spend it differently?
Of course. Theoretically, he's an arm of the government. They are charged with enforcing federal law, but it's discretionary. You know that, just like a state prosecutor, you have discretion whether or not to prosecute a particular crime.
I'm going to make a prediction. I'm feeling it in my gut.
You're feeling what?
Feeling that the president is going to step in on Jeff Sessions and go, dude, I don't want to fund that.
I wouldn't be too sure because Trump has made a couple of contradictory statements about marijuana. So
what does that mean? Really? Him saying something contradictory?
Well, he's like any other politician, and I don't fault him for that. He has made statements that he believes that marijuana should be legalized, that it's a good source of tax revenue, and then he sort of flipped.
Right.
Yeah, and then he sort of flipped and said, he does not believe recreational marijuana should be legalized. It's a gateway drug, and it can cause a myriad of other problems. So he's kind of taken a flip-flop approach, but Jeff Sessions has been pretty definitive in his statements.